All right, here we are. We're good. We're in. I hope all that activity I hear outside just now in the driveway won't involve me being forced to go out to the driveway and canceling this live. But anyway, it is Zerilath, and we are going to get back into our reading of the Babylonian Talmud. I took a look ahead. There's a couple of pages left of this chapter, so I think we can get this chapter out tonight if we hustle through. We hit up a lot of interesting bullet points in the last segment on slavery and suppression of women as slaves, as well as some aspects of talismanic protocols, and a few other little tidbits here and there. So, this is the most convoluted way one can ask for to get hints and pieces to certain applications of the magic that these people do. So let's jump back into it. We're just gonna start here on the page. Said Jeremiah in the name of Simeon B. Lachish, two scholars who quietly discourse on the Torah among themselves. The Holy One, blessed be he, hearkens unto them and listens to their desires. For it is written in Malachi 3:16, then conversed they that fear the Lord one with the other, etc. Conversed means conversed quietly, as it is written in Psalms 47:4, I believe is what we're looking at there. He will subdue quiet people under us, subdue and converse as expressed by the same term in the two passages, hence the similitude. What is meant by the words that thought upon his name, said Ami, even when one intended to observe a commandment, but was accidentally prevented and could not accomplish it, it is credited to him as if he had actually observed it. Thus the passage thought upon his name is interpreted. I left my water upstairs. Read another passage and I gotta go up and get it. Said Hanina Be'id, whoever observes a commandment as prescribed will not be the recipient of bad things, for it is written in Ecclesiastes 8:5. Whoso keepeth the commandment will experience no evil thing. Asi, others say Hanina said, even if the Holy One, blessed be he, has so decreed it that he shall experience evil things, the decree is annulled through the prayers of this man, as it is written in Ibid 4. Because the word of a king is powerful, and who may say unto him, what doest thou? And this immediately followed by the passage, whoso keepeth the commandment will experience no evil thing. Right? Well, that's entirely like I said, there's so many allusions to, karmic retribution for wrongdoing, right? And so, because this is in the Talmud about Babylonian government, then you're really kind of just talking about obeying the law and nothing bad happens to you, right? Which is an oversimplification of what it really means is be mindful of honoring yourself by remembering God, or in a more purer sense, the higher force. I call it the Jinn region. Because of the reflection of you, not because of your impossible, not because of the standards of your impossible God. I'm going to take a quick second here to run upstairs. I forgot my drinking glass. I'll hopefully have water in it. And good. I do. Ar Abba, in the name of Arsimeon B. Lachish, said, two scholars who mutually instruct themselves in the law, the Holy One, blessed be he, hearkens to their voices. For it is written in Song of Solomon 8:13, Thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions, listen for thy voice. Oh, let me hear it. What if they do not do so? They cause the Shekinah to move away from Israel. For further it is written in Ibid 14, Flee away, my beloved, etc. See? The Shekinah, flee away, my beloved. That's more the manner in which a man will refer to his woman. I mean, flee away, my beloved. You wouldn't call you wouldn't call God my beloved, right? I mean, actually, you probably would. Some of those psalms in context. Yeah. Well, but either way, I think I to me it came off with a feminine flair, right? You know, Shekinah, I think has a little bit of that to it, but anyway, the same in the name of the same authority said, the Holy One, blessed be he, loves two scholars who combine to study the law. For it is written, Solomon's Song 2:4, and his banner over me was love, said Rabha, provided that they know something of law, but have no instructor to teach them at the place where they reside. The same said again, the man who lends his money is more deserving than the charitable man, and the most deserving of all is he who gives charity surreptitiously or invests money in partnership with the poor. Furthermore, he said, if thy teacher is jealous for thy welfare and as spiteful as a serpent, if thou neglect thy studies, carry him on thy shoulders, because from him thou wilt learn. And if an ignoramus plays the pious, do not live in his neighborhood. Interesting. Let me register that passage again. The same said again, the man who lends his money is more deserving than the charitable man. The most deserving of all is he who gives charity surreptitiously or invests money in partnership with the poor. Furthermore, he said, if thy teacher is jealous for thy welfare and as spiteful as a serpent, if thou neglects thy studies, carry him on thy shoulders, because from him thou wilt learn. And if an ignoramus plays the pious, do not live in his neighborhood. Okay, that sounds all fairly wise and agreeable. It's kind of interesting way of phrasing it, but at the same time, I'm trying to understand where the economic principle of this transforms to. The man who lends his money is more deserving than the charitable man. Is more deserving than the charitable man. Okay, I see. Right. So moneylenders deserve more than guys who just give their money away for charity. Men who do things out of a kindness, I suppose, is what it sounds like, right? So the most deserving of all. So I don't necessarily no, I don't agree with that. But hold on, let me figure this out here, right? Let's pretend that I didn't consent to any of this, because I haven't, because I did not understand it when I first read it. Let's go back and comprehend it. The man who lends his money is more deserving than the charitable man, and the most deserving of all is he who gives charity surreptitiously or invests money in partnership with the poor. Right, so a partnership with the poor, that's interesting, because that sounds like it's got a tremendous amount of dignity for people that are poor and is not asking to make slaves of them or something to that effect. But the most deserving, but he says a charitable man, but the most deserving is one who gives charity surreptitiously. So hold on a second. Let me get surreptitiously properly defined, because I have used that word before with a decent amount of context, but that's in flow state. Obtained, done, or made by clandestine or stealth means. Oh, okay. So, discretion, to be discreet. Discreetly. I would have used the word discreet. That would have been a little bit more accessible of a word there. But, so, he who gives charity with discretion. Anyway, so furthermore, he said, if thy teacher is jealous for thy welfare, and as spiteful as a serpent, if thou neglect thy studies, carry him on thy shoulders. So if the teacher is jealous and he is spiteful, you want to carry that teacher. And it says that from him you will learn. I guess if he's a good teacher, but then it ends the whole sentence, because it's still the same sentence, there's just comma breaks here. And if an ignoramus plays the pious, do not live in his neighborhood. So if you got a guy who's like teaching, but he's kind of self-righteous, you don't want to be around self-righteous people, is what I think he is saying, right? So, yeah, like, it's the money lending that ruins this whole passage. Otherwise, everything kind of makes sense, right? If you're if you're getting into a partnership with the poor by lending them money, I'm assuming it's because these are poor people that can use that money to work for you or something, right? Because they've got to, because you've lent them the money. It's a loan, right? This is why I've never liked doing banking business. See, this is the banking business like this. This right here explains a lot in the morality of bankers, wouldn't it now? You kind of get to a principal idea of what they think they're doing. Ar kehana, according to others, ar asi, and according to still others, Ar Abba, in the name of Ar Simeon B. Lekish, said, whoso raises a vicious dog in his house prevents charity to proceed therefrom, for the poor are afraid to go in, as it is written in Job 6:14, as though I were one who refuseth kindness to a friend, as though I were one who refuseth, is expressed in Hebrew by one word, via lamos. In Greek, we have that word there which means dog, and hence out of Simeon's interference. And look here. Here is the first time thus, we're 127 pages into this English translation, where this English translation had to cite where the Jews were citing the Greeks because they didn't have a word for it in Hebrew, because they lost that word. Naaman, he even forsaketh the fear of the Lord, for it is written at the end of the verse, ibid ibid, and forsaketh the fear of the Lord. Once a woman went into a certain house to bake, and a dog, through barking at her, caused her to have a miscarriage. Damn, that's a horrendous dog. Jeez. Or she was just ultra effing timid. Said the landlord of the house, fear him not, I have deprived him of his teeth and claws. But the woman answered, throw thy favors to the dogs, the child is already gone. Said Arhuna, it is written in Ecclesiastes 11:9, rejoice, O young man, in thy childhood, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youthful vigor, and walk firmly in the way of thy heart, and in the direction in which thy eyes see. But know thou that concerning all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Does not this passage contradict itself? Nay, up to the words and no are words of the misleader, and from here on are words of the good leader. Resh Lakish said up to and no, the theoretical part of the law is meant, and from there on it speaks of good acts. Knee buckles are clean, etc., said Ar Yahuda. This birth means arm bandages. To this Ar Yosef objected. We have learned that a birth is virtually clean, and one may go out with it on the Sabbath. If it is an armband, how can that be? The latter is subject to defilement. It means that the birth is worn on the same part of the leg as the arm bandage on the arm. Rabban and Arhuna sat before Jeremiah, who slumbered, and Rabban said, a birth is worn on one of the thighs, and kabalim on both shins. But Arhuna said both are worn on both shins, but the chain attached to the birith on both shins is called kabalim, and the chain makes them a perfect vessel. At this joint of the argument, Jeremiah awoke and said, I thank you. Even so, I heard Yohanan say, when Dimi came to Neherdai, he sent to tell the sages, my former information in the name of Yohanan from the Zitz was, a woven thing was an error. So was said in his name. Whence the abduction that any ornament is subject to becoming defiled. From zitz, the golden plate on the forehead of the high priest, and whence the abduction that textile fabrics are also subject to becoming defiled. From the passage in Leviticus 11:32, or raiment, which includes any textile fabric whatsoever. The rabbis taught any piece of textile fabric or any trifle of an ornament is subject to defilement. But how is it with an article which is half texture and half ornament? It is also subject to defilement. As for an ornament which is carried in a bag, the bag being of woven material becomes defiled, and with it the ornament. But if the ornament was carried in a piece of cloth, the cloth remains undefiled. Is a piece of cloth not a textile fabric? Yeah, but by that is meant that the bag, even if not made of textile fabric, becomes defiled because it is attached to the garment. What is a bag used for? Said Ar Yohanan. Poor people use them for the purpose of putting some trifles in them, and then hang them on the necks of their daughters. It is written, and Moses was wroth with the officers of the host. In Numbers 31:14, said Ar Nehman, in the name of Rabbi Abuhu, thus said Moses unto Israel, have ye then returned to your first sin, that ye have let the females live? They answered him in Ebed 49, thy servants have taken the sum of the men of war who have been under our command, and there lacketh not one man of us, implying that none had sinned. Said Moses again, if such can be the case, why need ye atonement? They answered, though we have straitened ourselves to keep aloof from sin, we could not put it out of our minds. We have therefore, in Ebed 50, brought an oblation unto the Lord. On this the school of our Ishmael taught, why did the Israelites of that generation require forgiveness? Because they had feasted their eyes on strange women. Ah, yes, the good old outsider inter thingy. Is that the, do the women uphold that? Right? Do the women, badger the elders? Is that how that works? Mishnah 5. A woman may go out with plaits of hair, they made of her own hair or of another woman, or of an animal with totafoth or sarbatin if fastened, with a hood or with a wig in her yard or private ground, with cotton wadding in her ear or in her shoe, or with cotton wadding prepared for her menstruation, with a grain of pepper or of salt, or with whatever else she may be accustomed to keep in her mouth, provided she does not put it in her mouth on the Sabbath to commence with. If it fell out of her mouth, she must not replace it. As for a metal or golden tooth, Rabbi permits a woman to go out with it, but the sages prohibit it. So that's very interesting. Isn't that interesting how that seems extraordinarily general, where the rabbis say a woman can go out if she's got a piece of gold in her mouth, but the sages say that she can't go out. There's a difference there. And then how's the authority pan out between the two? Do they have enough of their Babylon for that? Gemara. It has been taught, provided a young woman does not go out with plaits of hair belonging to an old woman, nor an old woman with plaits of hair belonging to a young woman, so far as an old woman is concerned, it would be nothing but right, for the plaits of a young woman would be a source of pride to her, and there is fear of her taking them off to show to others. But why should a young woman be prohibited to go out with plates belonging to an old woman? They are a disgrace to her, and surely she would not take them off for exhibition. The teacher, while treating on plates with respect to an old woman, also makes mention of the case of a young woman for the sake of antithesis. With a hood or a wig in her yard, said Rab, everything prohibited by the sages to be worn on public ground must not be worn in the yard, save a hood and a wig. Ar Anani be Sasan, in the name of Ar Ishmael, said, everything may be worn in the yard like a hood. But why does Rab discriminate in favor of these objects, said Ula, in order that she may not become repulsive to her husband? Huh. What? Okay, hold on. Everything everything may be worn in the yard like a hood. But why does Rab discriminate in favor of these objects? So, okay. I guess, like, I'm just wondering, like, what would make it repulsive? Like, everything is repulsive if it isn't that and that? And is that just the way men are? It's just like you must see your women as repulsive if they're not covered this way? And once again, here we are with my point about what they do in Muslim countries, you know, especially in Shia. And with cotton in her ears or in her shoes, Rami B. Ezekiel taught only when tied to her ears or her shoes. Do the women read the Talmud? Do the women have their own version of the Talmud? I wonder, right? What does a woman think if she knows that this is what's in the Talmud? And cotton wadding prepared for her menstruation. In this case, said Rabbah, even if it is not tied, it may be worn because being disgusting, it will not be handled. Ar Nehemiah B. Ar Abba questioned Rabbah, how is it if the same was prepared with a handle? And he answered, then it is also allowed. And so also it was taught by Ar Nahman B. Oshia in the name of Ar Yohanan. Okay, we're going to take a break here because it's 9:30 now. And we're zipping along through this. We're going to do real good in, I think, getting to the end of the chapter. We'll see how I feel when we get to the end, because depending on how early we hit this bad boy. So I'm going to run another album today, and I gave this a screening, and it sounded pretty good. This is Gospod. The first song that you heard was called Banquet, and now we're going into Coronation.
My wife said, if you win, we'll fly to Asia. If I win, we'll fly to Paris. I bet you won't get
Hey.
Using.
There we go. All right. We'll let the ad run on that, so that way that's queued up for the next thing. All right, we're doing really good. We've got only a couple of pages here. We're gonna be done with this chapter by 10 o'clock, pretty much. All right. Aryonon went to the college with cotton wadding in his ear on Sabbath, and his colleague objected to it. Aryoni went into unclaimed ground with it against the opinion of all his contemporaries, with a grain of pepper or a grain of salt, the former to take away any bad odor of the breath, and the latter as a remedy for toothache, or with whatever else she is accustomed to keep in her mouth, meaning ginger or cinnamon, a metal or a gilt tooth, etc., said Zera. They differ concerning a gold tooth only, for a silver tooth is unanimously permitted. And so we have learned plainly in Aboretha, said Ebai, Rabbi Elazar, and Simeon B. Elazar, all three agree to the opinion that anything provoking disgust or ridicule a woman will not wear for show. Rabbi, as just cited, Elazar, as he freed a woman bearing a box of kashos, or a perfume bottle. Our Simeon B. Elazar, as we have learned in the following Boretha, anything below that hairnet is permitted to be worn outside. Mishnah 6. Women may go out with a coin fastened to a swelling on their feet. Little girls may go out with laces on and even with screws in their ears. Screws? I'm assuming they don't mean screws like carpenter, like screws and nails and stuff. Screw must mean something else in Jewish apparel. I'm assuming. Arabians may go out in the long veils and medians in their mantillas. So may even all women go out, but the sages spoke of existing customs. She may fold her mantilla around a stone, nut, or a coin used as buttons, provided she does it not especially on the Sabbath. You know, so yeah, like there's not just Sabbath going on here with this shit. There's a lot of all the time going on. Gemara. Little girls may go out with laces. The father of Samuel did not permit his daughters to go out with laces nor to sleep together. He made bathing places for them during the month of Nisan, and curtains during the month of Tishri. He did not permit them to go out with laces. Were we not taught that girls may go out with laces? The daughters of Samuel's father wore colored, fancy laces. Unless they take them off to show to others, he did not permit them to go out with them. Fold her mantilla around a stone, etc. But did not the first part of the Mishnah say that she may fold it, etc.? Said Abai, the last part of the Mishnah has reference to a coin which is not permitted. Abai questioned, may a woman fold her mantilla on Sabbath shrewdly around a nut for the purpose of bringing it to her little son? And this question is according to both. To him who permits subtlety in case of fire, and also according to him who forbids it. According to him who permits it, it may be that only in case of fire he permits it. As if it were not allowed, he would extinguish it. But this is not the case here. And according to him who prohibits it, it may be that he does so because the clothing seller usually so bears the clothes. But here, as it is not the custom to bear it so, it may be that it is permitted. The question remains. Mishnah 7. The cripple may go out with his wooden leg. Such is the decree of Armayar, but Aryosi prohibits it. If the wooden leg has as a receptacle for pads, it is subject to defilement. Crutches are subject to defilement by being sat or trodden upon, but one may go out with them on Sabbath and enter the outer court of the temple. The chair and crutches of a paralytic are subject to defilement, and one must not go out with them on the Sabbath, nor enter the outer court of the temple. Stilts are not subject to defilement, but nevertheless, one must not go out with them on Sabbath. Gemara. Rabbah said to Ar-Nahman, how are we to accept the teachings of the Mishnah? Did Armayar permit the cripple to go out with a wooden leg on the Sabbath, and Ar-Yossi prohibiting his doing so, or vice versa? Answered Ar-Nahman, I know not. And how shall the halakha prevail? Answered Ar-Nahman, again, I know not. It was taught. Samuel and also Arhuna begin the Mishnah. A cripple shall not, etc. And Ar-Yosef said, as both sages read the Mishnah so, we shall do the same. Rabbah b. Shira, however, opposed. Was he not aware that when Arhanan b. Rabbah taught so to Haya, the son of Rab, the father showing him with the movement of his hands to change the names, in reality Samuel himself has also receded from the former teaching and has corrected. A cripple may go out, so is the decree of Armayar on Hamoth 101a. And must not enter the outer court, etc. A Tana taught before Ar Yohanan that one may go in with them in the outer court, said Ar Yohanan to him. I teach that a woman may perform the shalitza with them. Hence they are considered shoes, and you say he may go in with them to the outer court. Go and teach the contrary. Mishnah 8. Boys may go out with bands and princes with golden belts, so may everyone else, but the sages adduce their instances from existing customs. Gemara. What kind of bands? Said Ar Eda Mary in the name of Ar-Nahman b. Baruch, who said in the name of Ar-Ashi b. Habin, quoting Ar Yehuda, reeds of a puha root, said Abaye, my mother told me that 3 of such wreaths give relief in sickness. 5 of them produce a complete cure, and 7 of them are even proof against witchcraft. Interesting. Wreaths of pu'a root. I want to know what pu'a root is. What is pu'a root? And I'm assuming that all this stuff is specific shit that exists, like, only in the Levant, is my my guess. All right, pu'a root. Makkah. Well, we have lots of places that seem to carry it in a pill form. So what's the deal? Tell me a story, man. Pua. Ibrahim. All right. AbarimPublications.com Let me see if they have this in English. All right, so this is what the Jews are saying about this root. There are two people named Pua in the Bible, a man and a woman. Although only a few English translations actually call the man Pua, see below. But even though in English their names are the same, in Hebrew they are completely different. We'll call them Pua 1 and Pua 2. And there's a visible difference that can be seen. You know what? Hold on a second. We'll do this real quick. Properties. Okay. There you go. That's good. That's good enough. So, and then you can see right here the two different spellings for the male and the female. All right. Etymology of Pua. The name Pua may be derived from the verb yappa, meaning to shine or be beautiful. So that must be the female version then? Yappa means beautiful. Now yepi means beauty. Okay. All right, so then what about for the meaning of Pua, Jones Dictionary, Old Testament, proper names reads splendid light. Okay, all right. Etymology of the other one. Okay, so Pua 2. The name Pua, the second, is either a transliteration of an Arabic word for mouth, as is suggested by Alfred Jones' Dictionary of Old Testament Proper Names, or it comes from a similar Hebrew word for mouth, peh. The verb pa'ah means to cleave or break apart, what one does with a sword, and derived noun, peh, means corner or side. Okay, right, and so breaking apart things with swords, cornering something, there's assertiveness, aggressiveness. This is the male. So Pua 1's the female. Pua 2 is the male. All right. Apparently related to the above or the otherwise inexplicable noun, meaning mouth. This word has a somewhat greater compass than its English counterpart. Okay. Then Pua meaning. Large step of liberty and reads utterances, Jones Dictionary, names proper, the more accurate mouth, DPD, right, okay, all right, I think we got an idea there of what they're talking about. All right. So you take these Pua roots and you make them into a wreath, and that's a ward. So Pua root is something that I am going to run. You know, I'm going to run that by a friend of mine. Hang on a second. Ashley. Pua root. You know it? It's part of Talmudic herbalism and magic. I mean, it's herbalism because they're using freaking roots, but it's magic because they're making protection wards, circles, making circles of protection with it. It's white magic. It's protecting yourself against witchcraft using your own witchcraft. And this only if they, the wreaths, have never seen sun, moon, or rain, never heard a hammer fall or a cock crow or the fall of footsteps. So I guess what they mean is the roots have to be wild roots that were found in nature. Nothing that you grew around human activity. So that's an animist principle, because you're asking for the root in the context of its nature spirit, as opposed to it in its crafted under the spirit of a garden. Excuse me. Right? It's the difference between Gerd, who is Freyr's consort or wife, versus Freya, who is Freyr's sister. And Freya's the wild natures. And Gerd is the cultivated nature. She is the garden. She's your guard. Said Ar Naaman be Itzhak, thy bread is cast upon the deep, meaning the remedy is an impossibility. The rabbis taught women may go out with a kutena stone to prevent miscarriage on the Sabbath. Kutena stone. Now that sounds cool. What's a kutena stone? I'm probably going to get a result from the same website. Watch. It's got the word Tana in it. And we already know how the Tana works. I'm getting other kinds of results that are complete non sequiturs. Hold on a minute. With a kutana stone. Why is it giving me these pants? I think they're called kutana. That's why they're giving me these pants. There's a kind of pants called kutana. I don't know if it's a brand or a type of pant style. Then I'm getting katana. Hold on. All right. Say Talmud. Okay. Katana stone. Well, I don't know where this katana stone is. Keeps wanting to give me katana. All right, so I don't know what a katana stone looks like. I wouldn't know how to identify one. It is said in the name of Armayer that they may even go out with the counterpoise of a katana stone, and not only such women as have already once miscarried, but even as a preventative to miscarriage. And not only when a woman is pregnant, but lest she become pregnant and miscarry. Said Ar Yemar be Shalmaya in the name of Abayi, but the counterpoise must be an exact one and made in one piece. Mishnah 9. It is permitted to go out with eggs of grasshoppers, or with the tooth of a fox, or a nail from the gallows where a man was hanged, as medical remedies. Okay? That's like, I guess they're citing the law from the bazillion years ago. Oh. Darn it. Damn it. Auto spell screwed it up. Auto spell fail. There we go. All right. All right, if I'm lucky, during this live stream, I'll have an answer for you on Pua root. Oh my god, stop making that noise. The eggs of a grasshopper as a remedy for toothache. Tooth of a fox as a remedy for sleep. So, like, is this just Dark Ages medicine? Like, do they still live by... They do. I believe they actually do. Like, they do this. I think they do this literally. As medical remedies, such as the decision of Armeyer... Yeah, as medical remedies, such as the decision of Armeyer, Abayi, and Rabbah both said, anything intended for a medical remedy, there is no apprehension of imitating the Amorites. Hence, if not intended as a remedy, there is apprehension of imitating the Amorites. But were we not taught that a tree which throws off its fruit, it is permitted to paint it and lay stones around it? It is right only to lay stones around it in order to weaken its strength. But what remedy is painting it? Is it not imitating the Amorites? Nay, it is only that people may see it and pray for mercy. We have learned in Aboretha it is not written. Leviticus 13:45, unclean, unclean shall we call out, to what purpose? That one must make his trouble known to his fellow man, that they may pray for his relief. Which is like, don't just keep, like if you're if you have certain troubles, let people know that can be helpful. Don't, go through unnecessary suffering kind of thing. So I think most people have that sense of kindness in them. Rabbina said the hanging up of a cluster of dates on a date tree as a sign that the tree throws off its fruit is in accordance with the above-mentioned teachers. Like, that comes off as such a non sequitur. Like it is so hard for me to keep that all, how does that wrap up with that, right? There's meaning that makes more sense in their world. Okay. Ooh, like I said, 10 o'clock. Here we are, last passage. If one says, kill this cock, for he crowed at night, or kill this hen, for she crowed like a cock, or I will drink and leave a little over, because of superstition, there is apprehension that he imitate the Amorites, but one may be a splinter of truth, or a piece of glass in a pot, that it may boil the quicker. The sages, however, prohibited pieces of glass as being dangerous. The rabbis taught one may throw a handful of salt in a lamp, that it may burn the brighter, or loam and fragments of earthenware, that it may burn more slowly. The saying, to your health, at wine drinking is no imitation of the customs of the Amorites. It happened that Ar-Akiba gave a banquet in honor of his son, and at every cup that he drank, he said, to the wine in the mouth, and to the health of the sages and their disciples. Okay, I'll let you guys look at the footnotes real quick. Then we're going to take a break and and figure out how far I want to take it from here. Because I may just want to go till 11 tonight. Which for tonight would be a 2-hour affair. All right. The general rule concerning the principal acts of labor on Sabbath. So this gets right down to, I guess, what you just do in a, quote, workable capacity. All right. So we'll see how that actually puts anything together. Let's take us to the next song in Gospod, the Esther album. This song is called Decree. All right, so there's a good chance that I can get through 11 pages in about the next hour or so, unless I get super side railed by some important stuff that comes up. We'll see how it goes. All right. Chapter 7, the general rule concerning the principal acts of labor on Sabbath. Mishnah 1, a general rule was laid down respecting the Sabbath. One who has entirely forgotten the principle of keeping the Sabbath and performed many kinds of work on many Sabbath days is liable to bring but one sin offering. He, however, who was aware of the principle of Sabbath, but forgetting the day, committed many acts of labor on Sabbath, is liable to bring a separate sin offering for each and every Sabbath day which he has violated. One who knew that it was Sabbath and performed many kinds of work on different Sabbath days, not knowing that such work was prohibited, is liable to bring a separate sin offering for every principal act of labor committed. One who committed many acts all emanating from one principal act is liable for but one sin offering. Gemara, what is the reason that the Mishnah uses expression, a general rule? Shall we assume that it means to teach us a subordinate rule in the succeeding Mishnah, and the same is the case with the Mishnah concerning the sabbatical year, where at first a general rule is taught and the subsequent Mishnah teaches a subordinate rule? Why does the Mishnah relating to tithes teach one rule and the succeeding Mishnah another, but does not call the first rule a general rule? Said Arhios B. Abin. Sabbath and the sabbatical years, in both of which there are principles and derivatives, he expressed a general rule. Tithes, however, in which there are no principles and derivatives, no general rule was laid down. But did not Bar Kapera teach us a general rule also in tithes? It must be therefore explained thus: the subject of Sabbath is greater than sabbatical, as the first applies to attached and detached things, while the sabbatical applies only to attached ones. The subject of the latter, however, is greater than tithes, as it applies to human and cattle food, while tithes apply only to human food, and Bar Kapara teaches a general rule in tithes also. Because it is greater than peh, the corner tithe, as the former applies also to figs and herbs, which is not the case with peh. It was taught concerning the statement of the Mishnah, he who forgot, etc., that Rab and Samuel both said, even a child that was captured by idolaters or a proselyte who remained among idolaters is regarded as one who was aware of the principle but forgot it and is liable, and both Ar Yohanan and Resh Lakesh said that the liability falls only upon him who was aware but subsequently forgot. The child and the proselyte in question are considered as if they were never aware and are free. I see. Okay. Proselyte. Let me see. Whoops, don't do that. Don't turn that on. I had to hit that button. Oh, that's a big program. Hope it doesn't start. It's gonna start, isn't it? Sorry, hold on. I have activated my shortcut program because the button was right next to the other button and my mouse slipped. And this thing's gonna take a minute. Shit. Hold on. Task manager. Can I turn it off? It's not even running yet. All right. There it goes. End task. Okay. We're still here? Good. We're still here. Sorry about that. Proselyte. That's what I was looking for. I wanted to make sure I understood the word proselyte. Right. Okay, a new convert. So child or new convert, right? So it's like it's giving them some grace because they are still technically among the profane. But you give them time, it's just that where they are in life right now. An objection was raised from the following. A general rule was laid down concerning the observation of the Sabbath. One who had entirely forgotten the principle of Sabbath and had performed many kinds of work on many Sabbath days is liable for but one sin offering. How so? A child which was captured by idolaters and a proselyte remaining with idolaters who had performed many acts of labor on different Sabbaths are liable for but one sin offering, and also for the blood or prohibited fats which he has consumed during the whole time, and even for worshiping idols during the whole time he is liable for only one sin offering. And also for the blood or prohibited fats? I find it, what the hell do they mean by that exactly? But anyway, and thus did he discuss before Ar Akiba, since the intentional transgressor and unintentional are both called sinners. I may say, as an intentional one cannot be called so unless he was aware that it is a sin. The same is the case with an unintentional, who cannot be called a sinner unless he was at some time aware that this is a sin. It is true, then, the above must be considered as never having been aware of it. This is the same thing. This is the same thing with Christians' rationale with the cross. It's like, if you don't know about Jesus' sacrifice, then you're only going to hell if you're a bad person. But if you're told about Jesus' sacrifice and you reject it, now you're going to hell. The whole thing was a fucking grift. Something to substantiate the conversion. Exploiting the doubts about who we are, because we forgot who we are. Said Ar Akiba to him, I will make an amendment to your decree, as the intentional transgressor could not be considered as such unless he is cognizant of his guilt at the time of action. So also should not the unintentional transgressor be considered as such unless he is cognizant at the time of action. By the way, also, this argument is also only really theoretically when you think about it in fucking existence, because original sin is a lie, because that kid can't possibly be innocent and free, because he carries original sin and doesn't have to be aware of sin. So the point is that if original sin were true, then you definitely wouldn't want to let the kid get any ideas that he is free. Because original sin is a lie, though. And they can't fuck you up that hard. They tried before. It doesn't work. They gotta let you grow into believing you want to live like this. I will make an amendment to your decree, as the intentional transgressor cannot be considered as such unless he is cognizant. I'm sorry, I read all that. Answered Munbaz, so it is, and the more so after your amendment. Thereupon Ar Akiba replied, according to your reasoning, one could not be called an unintentional transgressor, but an intentional. Hence, it is plainly stated. How so? A child, etc. This is only in accordance with Rab and Samuel, and it contradicts Ar Yohanan and Ar Simeon B. Lakish. They may say, is there not a Tanamunbaz who freed them? We hold with him and with his reason, namely, it is written in Numbers 15:29, a law shall be for you for him that acteth through ignorance. And the next verse says in Ebed 30, but the person that doeth aught with a high hand, the verse compares then the ignorant to him who has acted intentionally, and as the latter cannot be guilty unless he was aware, of his sin. The same is the case with the ignorant, who cannot be considered guilty unless he was at some time aware of the sin. Another objection was raised from a Mishnah farther on. 40 less 1 are the principal acts of labor, and deliberating for what purpose the number is taught, said Ar Yohanan, for that if one performed them all through forgetfulness, he is liable for each one of them. How is such a thing as utter forgetfulness to be imagined? We must assume that although cognizant of the day being Sabbath, one forgot which act of love were prohibited, and this is correct only in accordance with Ar Yohanan, who holds if one is ignorant of what acts of labor constitute sin punishable with kerath, being cut off, and commits one of those acts even intentionally, he is bound to bring a sin offering only, and such an instance can be found in case one knows that those acts of labor were prohibited at the same time being ignorant of that punishment which is kerath. But according to Ar Simeon B. Lakish, who holds that one must be totally ignorant of both the punishment of kerath and what acts are prohibited on Sabbath, how can the above case be found? He was aware that Sabbath must be kept, but what was he aware of in the observance of Sabbath? He only knew of the law governing the going outside of the boundaries of the city. But who is the Tana of the following Boretha? The scriptural passage, him that acteth through ignorance, refers to one who was ignorant both of the principle of Sabbath and the prohibition of the acts of labor. One who was cognizant of both is referred to by the scriptures as the person that doeth aught with a high hand. If one, however, was cognizant of the principle of Sabbath, but not of the prohibition of the acts of labor, or vice versa, or even if he knew that the acts of labor were prohibited, but did not know that they involved culpability requiring a sin offering, while he is not the scriptural man that acteth through ignorance, still he is culpable for a transgression requiring a sin offering. It's a munbaz mentioned above. Ar Huna said, one who has been traveling in a desert and does not know what day is Sabbath must count 6 days from the day on which he realizes that he has missed the Sabbath. Okay, so he has to, if he realizes that he doesn't know what day it is, he has to count from that day forward from the beginning. This kind of reminds me when I'm exercising, it's like if you've forgotten what rep you're on, you repeat the rep. So you're like 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Like I've done 8, but I'm like I've only registered 4 of them because I wasn't paying attention to the other 4 I was doing. Right? You see how that works? So anyway, and observe the 7th. Haya bi Rab said, he must observe that very day and then continue his counting from that day. And what is the point of their differing? The former holds that one must act in accordance with the creation, which commenced 6 days before the Sabbath, while the latter holds that one must be guided by Adam's creation on the eve of Sabbath. An objection was made. If a man while traveling in a desert forgot when the Sabbath arrives, he must count 1 day to 6 and then observe the 7th. Does this not mean he must count 6 days and then observe the 7th? Nay, it may be said that it means that very day and continue his counting from that day. If this be taught, why are we taught he must count 1 to 6? It should be taught plainly. He must observe a day and continue counting from that day. Moreover, we were taught in a Boretha, if one while traveling in the desert forgot when the Sabbath arrives, he must count 6 days and observe the 7th. The objection to Arhaya bi Rab is sustained. Okay, so what I would gather from what they are saying you got to do is that if you, like, because sometimes I think about this when I think about my weekly kind of routining myself. Do we go, if you're alone in the desert, right, you need to know this before you end up alone in the desert losing track of your days. And I think that if you, in the middle of your reset week, you get to civilization and somebody tells you that the Sabbath was yesterday, you would continue this until you hit the Sabbath and do it, and then I think you would hit the Sabbath again. So you might do 2 Sabbath days back to back, and then jump back on the cycle, right? You're working very hard to realign yourself with this particular system, right? They're on this 7 numerological path, right? Rabbah said, referring to the traveler who forgot the Sabbath, on every day except one on which he realizes that he has missed the Sabbath, he may perform enough labor to sustain himself, but one that should do nothing and die of hunger. Nay, only in case he provided himself with his necessities on the preceding day. Perhaps the preceding day was Sabbath. Therefore read, he may labor even on that day to sustain himself. In what respects is that day, then, to be distinguished from the other days by means of Kiddush and Havdalah? And said Rab again, if he only collects the number of days he has been traveling, he may labor all day on the 8th day of his journey in any event, for he surely did not start on his journey on a Sabbath. Is this not self-evident? Lest one say that one could not only not start out on the Sabbath, but also not on the day before the Sabbath. Hence, if he went out on the 5th day of the week, he is permitted to work on both the 8th and the 9th day of his journey. Therefore, he comes to teach us that only on the 8th day of his journey would he be permitted to work, for frequently one comes upon a caravan on Friday and starts out even on that Tuesday. One who has entirely forgotten, etc., whence is this deduced, said Ar-Naaman in the name of Rabba B. Abuhu. There are 2 verses in the scripture via Exodus 31:16, and the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, and Leviticus 19:3, and my Sabbaths shall ye keep. So is this to be explained? The first means the observance of the commandment of the Sabbath generally, and the second means one observance of the commandment for each Sabbath. One who knew the principle of Sabbath. What is the treason of a difference between? What is the reason of a difference between the former and the latter part of the Mishnah? Said Ar-Naaman, for what transgression does the scripture make one liable for a sin offering? For what is done through ignorance is the former part of the Mishnah, case of one who does not aware that it was Sabbath, it is dealt with, and hence only one sin offering is imposed, while in the latter, the case dealt with is one who was aware that it was Sabbath. But ignorant as to the act of labor, hence a sin offering for each act is prescribed. Liable for a sin offering, etc. Whence do we deduce the distinction between acts of labor, said Samuel. It is written in Exodus 31:14, every one that defileth, it shall be surely put to death. We see then that the scripture has provided many deaths for defiling the Sabbath, but does not the verse refer to one who violates the Sabbath wantonly, as it cannot be applied to an international violator? For it is already written in Exodus 35:2, whosoever doeth work thereon shall be put to death. Therefore apply it to an unintentional sinner. How then will you explain the words put to death? That is only the pecuniary equivalent of being put to death. He shall bring a sin offering which costs money. Why not advance the distinction between the acts of labor? Oh, boy. Put to death. That is... Where did I go? The acts of labor, as Adonathan does elsewhere. Samuel is not of the opinion of Adonathan, but Aryossi, who says that the additional commandments not to kindle a fire on the Sabbath was taught additionally for the special purpose of conveying to us that one who does kindle a fire is not to be punished either with karath or stoning, for we have learned in a Boretha the additional commandment not to kindle a fire on the Sabbath was taught additionally for the special purpose of conveying to us that one who kindles a fire on the Sabbath is not to be punished either with karath. All right. We're going to take a quick look here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Still got 8 pages left here. All right, well, let's take the next break and figure it out. Next song is called Honor.
If you feel like your brain craves pleasure from lust,
Darn. Sorry. Thank you. Ugh. Alright. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's get back to it. The special purpose of conveying to us that one who kindles a fire on the Sabbath is not to be punished either with kerath or stoning. Such is the opinion of our Yossi. Is not to be punished with a kerath. So, well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad we're not stoning anybody over these fucking little transfucking-gressions. Wow. Wow, how kind and generous of the benevolent overlords, eh? Nathan says it is written for the sake of separation from other acts. Let then the separation of acts of labor be adduced, whence Ariosi adduces them in the following Boretha. It is written in Leviticus 4:2, and do of any one of them as follows. Sometimes one is only bound to bring one sin offering for all transgressions, and sometimes one is bound to bring a sin offering for each and every transgression separately. Yeah, thank you for catching that, Susie. I'm usually on point with that. Said Ariosi B. Hanaina, why does Ariosi explain that passage thus? The verse should read one of them, Akath Meheno, but in reality it reads of one of them, Miakath Meheno. Or it should read of one them, Miakath Heno. But it reads of one of them. Therefore, he explains that sometimes one is equal to many, and sometimes many equal one. Okay, which that's kind of gets into the weird rationalizations for the dogmatic version of Catholic Trinitarianism. And all of it is yeah, I mean, those distinctions, it's funny, like, those distinctions can mean something, right? Like I mean, they do mean something in conveyance of information. the fact that your law is such a small thing that it requires this level of nonsensical particularities is the real problem. And then, yeah, well, anyway, Rabbah questioned Naaman, how is it if one is ignorant of both, of the day being Sabbath and the prohibition of the acts of labor on that day? Answered Naaman, take one instance at a time. You say he was ignorant of the day being Sabbath. Then he is bound to bring a sin offering. How would it be if, on the contrary, I had said that he was ignorant of the prohibition of the acts of labor first? Would you say that he becomes liable to a sin offering for each and every act performed? Said Arashi, let us see from the man's actions. How would it be if one came to him and reminded him of its being Sabbath without calling his attention to the fact that he was working? If the man immediately stopped his work, it is clear that he had actually forgotten that it was Sabbath. If, however, the man was reminded by a third party that he was working without having his attention called to the fact that it was Sabbath, and he immediately quit work, it is evident that he was not cognizant of the prohibition of the acts of labor. Like this is trying to psychically get in your head. Like, these guys are trying to say, like, they're trying to figure out if you know that you're fucking sinning. Does he know? Does he know? Because if he doesn't know, he can't touch him. You can see how ridiculous it gets. It is evident that he was not cognizant of the prohibition of the acts of labor, hence he would become liable to bring a sin offering for each and every act that is performed. Said Rabbaina to Arashi, what difference does it make if one is reminded that it is Sabbath and he quits work? He becomes aware that it is Sabbath, and if he is reminded of his working, he also becomes aware that the day is Sabbath, hence it makes no difference. Rabbah said, supposing the following case happened. One reaped and ground the equivalent in size of a fig on a Sabbath, without knowing that it was Sabbath, and on another Sabbath did the same thing, knowing it was Sabbath, but not knowing that such acts of labor were prohibited, then remembered that he had committed a transgression on the Sabbath through ignorance of the day being Sabbath, and took a sheep and set it aside for sin offering. You know, I do my I do my daily thing, and when I miss my daily thing, it just throws off the rhythm and the consistency and the work that goes into the meaning of the daily practice. But you are using that as kind of this disciplinary metric for yourself, right? This is part of building a healthier relationship with how you operate the Saturnian mechanics of going through cycles. And I'm pretty sure, I think I covered it on this series just a few episodes ago. I went and I looked up to double check how we did this stuff, right? Because they don't use they don't use our pagan days, right? You know, they don't call Friday, right? But also I sat there and I said, we don't. It seems to me that the European didn't work on a 7-day week schedule. It didn't feel like we did. It's either that or we did and we had different names for it, because it just seems like it, it just seems like Saturn's day doesn't fit the bill, right? Moon day is fine. Mani, it's Mon day, the day of Mani, the moon god. Tyr's day, Wotan's day, Thor's day, Freyr's day, Saturn's day. Saturn, we wouldn't have Saturn. Saturn wouldn't be the god we would put there. That's a Greek. It's a Roman god, Saturn. We would perhaps have Jord there. Maybe it's Jord's day. I like Jord's day. Should I start calling Saturdays Jord's day? Jord has the feast bounty, and the feast bounty is the product of the Saturnian egalitarian discipline, right? Which is partially misconstrued by the quote Protestant work ethic, right? Which is the Protestant version of that system is a bit harsh, kind of like it, because it's trying to be Talmud light, right? You go into these fucking ultra fucking like Zionist level churches. But anyway. Without knowing that it was Sabbath, and on another Sabbath it did the same thing, knowing it was Sabbath, but not knowing that such acts of labor were prohibited, then remembered that he had committed a transgression on the Sabbath, and through ignorance of the day being Sabbath, and took a sheep and set it aside for a sin offering. Suddenly he recollected that he had also committed a transgression on the other Sabbath. Through his ignorance of the prohibition of the acts of labor, what would the law be in such a case? I can say that the sheep set aside for sin offering for the first transgression suffices also for the second, although in reality 2 sin offerings were required to atone for the second transgression. The 1 sin offering would suffice, because it is in truth not brought for forgetting the Sabbath, but for reaping and grinding. The reaping in the first instance carries with it the reaping in the second, as also the grinding in the first instances carries with it the grinding in the second, and 1 sin offering atones for all. Assuming, however, that in the second instance, when he forgot about the prohibition of the acts of labor, he, at some later time, recollected only having reaped, but forgot that he also ground, and having set aside the sin offering, he became liable on account of his transgression in the first instance. When he forgot about the Sabbath, he atones for the reaping and grinding on the first Sabbath, and for the reaping on the second Sabbath, but not for the grinding on the second Sabbath. Hence, and also, after also recollecting that he had ground, he must bring an additional sin offering. Abaye, however, says the 1 sin offering atones for all, because the grinding, which he atones for in the first instance, also carries with it the grinding in the second instance. Why so? For the reason that in both instances the acts atoned for are analogous. When a sin offering was brought to a confession, a confession was made. Inciting the sin committed in the first instance of grinding was mentioned, and applies also to the grinding in the second instance, therefore no additional sin offering. Okay, so if you confess all your sins in one confession, that's one sin offering. If you have to confess again because you were withholding a sin, then you do another sin offering. Okay, so in their world, that makes sense to me. Other than the fact that it's absolutely ridiculous that they're doing sin offerings over all this shit. It was taught, if one has eaten tallow, which is prohibited, on 2 different occasions, and at both times the tallow was the equivalent in size of an olive or larger, and afterwards he was reminded of the first occasion and later on the second occasion also, what is the law in his case? Aryonan says he must bring 2 sin offerings. Why so? Because he recollected the transgression at different times, Resh Lakish. However, says he need bring only 1 sin offering. What is Yohanan's reason? Because it is written in Leviticus 4:28, for his sin which he hath committed, and he adduced therefrom that for every sin committed one must bring a separate sin offering. And Resh Lakish holds according to the passage Ebed 26 concerning his sin offering, and it shall be forgiven him, and claims that it being one and the same sin, only 1 sin offering is sufficient. But what will Resh Lakish do with the verse for his sin which he hath committed, that refers to the sin offering which had already been brought and therefore could not apply to a later sin? And what about Ar Yohanan and the passage concerning his sin, and it shall be forgiven? Ar Yohanan explains this as follows. If a man ate tallow, equivalent in size to an olive and a half, and later ate another piece, the size of half an olive, afterwards he recollected having eaten tallow, but thought that it was the size of 1 olive, might some not say that the remaining piece eaten in the first instance should be added to the piece eaten in the second instance, and thus constitute another piece, the equivalent in size to an olive, and make him liable for another sin offering? Therefore the passage, which means after once having obtained forgiveness for the transgression on the first occasion, the second cannot be counted in with the first. It was taught, if one intended to pick up a thing detached, for instance a knife that had fallen in a row of vegetables, and while doing so accidentally cut off one of the growing vegetables, he is free. If, however, he intended to cut something lying on but not attached to the ground, and instead cut off something growing out of attached to the ground, Rabbah declares him free, because because no intention to cut off the growing object existed in the mind of the man. Oh my God! The psychic intrusion that is necessary to uphold these fucking laws. It's insane. Abaya declares him culpable for the reason that while the man did not intend to cut off what he really did, still the intention to cut was prevalent in the man's mind, and he really did cut. Hence he is the scriptures refer to as one who acteth unintentionally. Gotcha. And I guess she didn't have to cite it because it's like a term. It's like a saying in the Bible, right? Perhaps. Okay. Where are we at? It's 139. What is it? 5 pages left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 4, 5. No, it's 5 pages. Excuse me. All right. It was also taught one who intended to throw from private ground into public only for a distance of 2 ells, but through 4 is freed by Rabbah, for the reason that the original intention was to throw within a permissible distance. Throwing for a distance of 2 ells only was permitted, but Abaye held him culpable for the reason that the act originally intended was accomplished. If one threw in public ground, mistaking it for private, Rab holds him free for the same reason as before, and Abiyah holds him culpable also for the same reason as he gave in the previous case. Both instances, though analogous, are necessary. In the first instance of cutting, where Rab holds the offender not culpable, the intention to cut off what was prohibited did not exist. But in the second instance, throwing 4 ells, it could not be accomplished without carrying out the intention of throwing for 2 ells and passing the 2 ells, the object landing at a distance of 4. Now, lest one might say that Rabbah coincides with the opinion of Abaye, and from the latter instance, it might be assumed that the offender intended to throw 2, but threw 4 ells. Hence, Rabbah holds him not culpable for the intention to throw 4 ells did not exist. Oh my God. But if one threw 4 ells in what he thought was private ground and which turned out to be public ground, the intention was carried out, for the object thrown reached its desired destination, and therefore, lest one say that in this case, Rabbah coincides with Abaye, the 2 instances are illustrated, and we are informed that not even in this case does Rabbah agree with Abaye. Mishnah 2. The principal acts of labor prohibited on the Sabbath are 40 less 1 via sowing, plowing, reaping, binding into sheaves, threshing, winnowing fruit. Actually, I will get back to this. We're going to start this Mishnah 2 after the break. We got 5 more pages to go, and we're going to read until I get to the end of the chapter, and then we're going to call it for the night. So, this is Invitation. So they tripped the ad for the next song like 2.5 minutes before the next song. They must have been needing to fit it in there. So anyway, this is a really fucking cool album. I gave it such a quick screening, and I like it's got a lot of the melancholia. You know, like I really like the heavy melancholia sometimes. You know, because it doesn't get you amped up, but it really just kind of, it's just one of those, it's a very reflective song to me. I consider it a very reflective song. I love that kind of stuff. Hey, what's up, Thelonious? For those who've been missing me calling it, this band, I'm going with one album called Esther by Gus Pod. They just released this 2 days ago, actually. Okay. That song was called Invitation. Now I invite you to listen to Mishnah 2. The principal acts of labor prohibited on the Sabbath are 40 less 1. And so there's an importance to 39, with 40 having a different kind of significance as a kind of a signifier of either the ending or the beginning. Via sowing, plowing, reaping, binding into sheaves, threshing, winnowing, fruit cleaning, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking, wool shearing, bleaching, combing, dyeing, spinning, warping, making 2 spindle trees, weaving 2 threads, separating 2 threads in the warp, tying a knot, untying a knot, sewing on with 2 stitches, tearing in order to sew together with 2 stitches, hunting deer, slaughtering the same, skinning them, salting them, preparing the hide, scraping the hair off, cutting it, writing 2 single-letter characters. Really? You can't write 2 single-letter character? What? So if I write 1 single-letter character, I'm okay, but I can't write 2. And I'm assuming that also means don't write a double letter character? Right? It's insane. Building, demolishing in order to rebuild. Kindling, extinguishing fire, hammering, transferring from one place into another. These are the principal acts of labor, 40 less 1. You know what? I don't care about the quote idea of restricting these, but I think that I kind of find this list interesting. I think that this is a memorable list. I have a feeling that this is kind of very, I mean, all this stuff is the people who do the work that would be part of communist unions, wouldn't it? Right? If you're part of a union, your union dictates your labor laws. If it's dictating your labor laws, they can dictate when you don't work. And then they're forcing you not to work. Like spiritually forcing you not to work. Because the way that this is all written, you know, like, it's a lazy Sunday, and then it's hot. The air conditioner breaks. I want to work on the air conditioner. I don't want to work on Sunday, but I gotta fucking fix this air conditioner. So I'm getting to fucking work for a little bit. I'm not, like, working the day away. Certainly nobody's fucking paying me to do this. Right? Now, maybe you don't experience things Like the inconvenience of your air conditioner breaking down on your day off. But some of us are not as well up to date on our shit as other people, okay? Sue us. Okay, but the numerology of 40 that this would fit into with whatever your wild card, because it's 40 less 1, that would fit it, right? Because anyway, because like no kneading. So like if I wanted to bake bread on Sunday for fucking fun, I can't do that? Because it's the only day of the week that I got time to fucking bake bread? Why do you want to bake bread? Your wife's gonna bake bread. Because I fucking like to bake too. Gemara. For what purpose is the number so distinctly given? They are enumerated, said Yohanan. If one labored through total ignorance of the laws governing the Sabbath, he must bring a sin offering for every act of labor performed. Sowing, plowing. Let us see, plowing being always done before sowing, let it be taught first the Tana, who taught as in the Mishnah, Woo Riders DG. Hello from Northeast Florida. God bless to all. Hey, good to meet you, Woo Riders DG. And you're new. You're new. How long you been subbed? Are you subbed? Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Good to see you around. Let it be taught first the Tana, who taught as in the Mishnah, is a Palestinian, and in his country they sow first and then plow. Someone taught that sowing, pruning, planting, transplanting, and grafting are all one and the same kind of labor. What would he inform us thereby? That if one performs many acts of labor, all of the same class, he is reliable for but one sin offering. Said Ar-Aha, in the name of Arhaya Biashi, quoting Ar-Ami, one who prunes is guilty of planting, and one who plants, transplants, or grafts is guilty of sowing and not of planting. I mean to say of sowing also. By the way, while we're talking about plants, my friend delivered on an answer about Pua over here. So if I can grab this real quick. And it she grabbed a couple of reference points from the William Davidson Talmud. So this is Shabbat 66b. I don't know exactly how close to this it is. But some of it sounds pretty darn familiar. I'm just trying to find where he started talking about for its ties for those of the but. The Huna said grudges against his goat as a son who cannot be separated from his father's strap from his right shoe, his tie stick. Father those left as a talisman. So the grudges are found in small children, especially boys who are cared for and occupied more than girls. They said it was the boys who are the ones who come out with the Nachmantes regarding the same remedy. Rabbi said Yitzhak. Hold on a second. I had seen it, and I only got so much time with the one song that I give myself, even if it's a long song, because, I just need to, the disease from knots, Pua plant, yeah. What asked them, but I said, so these are the knots of the pua, which bind the pua plant for healing and virtue. Also told me they prevent the disease from knots. Me, getting the worse. Okay. Lock of them and not of the moon. He does not. The rooster and the clucking. They cure 7, even witchcraft. Okay, so anyway. Okay, sorry. Let's get back to it. Thank you. I have to just analyze that more. By next show, I will have read that and understood it a little bit better. Especially because I'm not sure where that lines up with this, but it does kind of sound like what I was reading, so I think it might be a rephrasing of what I read. Also so distinctly given. For what purpose is the number so distinctly given? They are enumerated, said Aryohanan. If one labored through total ignorance of the laws governing the Sabbath, he must bring a sin offering for every act of labor performed. Sowing, plowing. Let us see. Plowing being always done before sowing. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I already read that. And then somebody said something about the Palestinians, right? Did I not scroll down the page yet? I'm sorry. I should have been paying attention to where I was. Transplanting, grafting, acts of labor. Grafting guilty of sowing or sowing not of planting. One who prunes and uses the branches for fuel is liable for 2 sin offerings, one for reaping and one for planting. Said Yosef, one who mows alfalfa hay is guilty of mowing and planting both, said Abaya. One who mows clover hay, which sheds its seeds when mowed, is liable for a sin offering for mowing and sowing. Hold on a minute. Yeah, is a Palestinian. That's where I read about the Palestinian. Translated. That is, performs an act of labor, all the same class, he is liable for but one sin offering. That's right. Then I started reading all that. Okay, we're good. We're good. Plowing. There is a boretha. Plowing, digging, furrowing are one and the same kind of labor. Ar Shesheth said, one who removes a knoll of earth in a house becomes liable for building, and if in a field he is liable for plowing. Rabbah said, filling up a hole in the house makes one liable for building, and in the field for plowing. Or Abba said, digging the same hole on Sabbath for the purpose of making use of the earth alone is free, even according to Ar Yehuda, who said that the performance of an unnecessary act of labor makes one culpable. He refers to labor that improves an object and not to that which spoils it. I mean, to me, it's just weird. Like, I just brought up, like, oh yeah, fixing the air conditioner was the example I came up with, right? You know, it's just like, especially because it's interesting, it's kind of fun, it's a bit of a challenge, it's heavy, it's a bit of a workout, it's something to do, it's something where I could possibly learn something in the process. I kind of find it fun to do work in certain manners. Telonius says, the word alfalfa is interesting. It's originally a Persian word with old Iranian roots referring to horse fodder. There is a local farm in my state called Alfalfa, so that's kind of interesting. Okay. Well, then maybe it had something to do with horses. Maybe it had literally something to do with Persian roots. Okay. Binding into sheaves. Rabbah said, one who gathers salt from salt works is guilty of the act of binding into sheaves. Abaya, however, said that binding into sheaves applies only to produce of the soil. Threshing. There is a boretha. Threshing, carting, and hackling, probably meant hacking, belong to one and the same class of labor. threshing, winnowing, and fruit cleaning, etc. Is not winnowing, fruit cleaning, and sifting one and the same class of labor? Abaya and Rabbah both said acts of labor executed during the construction of the tabernacle are enumerated separately, though they are of an analogous nature. Let pounding then also be enumerated as labor, inasmuch as the spices for incense had to be pounded, said Abaya. It is true, this is also one of the acts of labor performed at the construction of the tabernacle. But as the poor people do not pound their grain, generally using it in the natural state, it is not included in the principal acts of labor. Rabbah, however, said the Mishnah should be understood in the sense Rabbi expounded it. The principal acts of labor are 40 less 1. Should pounding be included, there would be 40 even. Let then one of the principal acts enumerated in the Mishnah be stricken out and substituted by pounding. Hence, it is best to accept Abaya's reason. The rabbis taught if there are several kinds of food before a man on the Sabbath, he may select such as he desires and even set it aside, but he must not separate the good from the bad, separate the good from the spoilt. If he does this, he is liable for sin offering. How is this to be understood? Hamnuna explained it thus. One may select the good from the spoil for immediate or later consumption, but he must not pick out the spoilt, leaving the good for later consumption. If he does this, he is liable. Abaya opposed. Is there anything mentioned in the Mishnah about separating the good from the spoil? He therefore explained the Boreth as follows. Food may be selected for immediate consumption and setting aside, but not for later consumption. If this is done, it is considered the same as storing it and involves the liability. This was reported to Rabbah by the rabbis, and he said Namani Abaya has explained it correctly. There's so much OCD in this nonsense. Seriously. You know, all this, so that way you are in a lockstep fucking tunnel of fucking behavior. It is, it is wild. And what occupies the mind daily with all of this stuff, right? And naturally, there's going to be a lot of diving into, this is your religion. So there's diving into all this stuff that's telling you who you are, and you have only this sense of this history racial identity. You have only that sense of it. I have a sense of my racial identity, my history. And it's very important. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden I have to read every book on the Bronze Age and make sure I'm living orthodox to the Bronze Age. Otherwise, I am not a Viking, bro. But it is important to understand why we did all the things that we did, and to say, would it have just as much meaning if we did it without doing the offending act, right? Like, some sort of tradition calls for some sort of sacrifice, and you're just like, listen, I'll offer something, but I'm not slaughtering a cow. Right? Things of that nature. But you offer something else. The cow is mostly like just an allegory for something of significant universal wealth. The cow is just a lot of money, you see. right? That's the idea of the cow, is that the cow is a lot of money. All right. Okay. Did I read that part? The rabbis taught if there are several kinds of food before a man on the Sabbath, he may select such as he desires, even set it aside, but he must not separate the food from... Okay, I'm sorry. I did read all of that. That was the whole thing. When two kinds of food were before a man, and he selected part of one kind and ate it, then selected part of another kind and ate it, and set it aside, Arashi learned in the Boretha that the man is free, but Arnyaramaya of Dipthi learned that he is culpable. Like, why is this? Why is it got to be like this on the Sabbath? Like this is such a minimum amount. It's like it's a threatening amount of time. It's just like, imagine being ordered to do nothing. Right? It's one thing to say you are free to do nothing, right? That's what it is to have a day off. Is the freeness to do nothing. Here, it's just like you are restricted from doing anything. Relax. It's more like a timeout than a relax, if you ask me. Right? This isn't relaxing. This is the timeout because you did something wrong during the week. Ugh. I can't believe that people want to have a whole world like this. All right. Is there not a Boretha that which teaches that he is? This presents no difficulty. Arashai refers to food served in a basket or a bowl, but Aryaramaya learned that the man sifted the food in a sieve. When Ardimi came to Babylon, he related it happened on a Sabbath when Ribbi's turn came to entertain the disciples, that Ar-Ami and Ariasi arrived. Ar-Ribhi placed before them a basket filled with fruit, together with the leaves and sprigs, and I am not aware what his reason was. Was he of the opinion that it is forbidden to separate food from trash, or was it his liberality? Hezekiah said, one who shells pressed lupines on the Sabbath is culpable. Does this mean to say that it is forbidden to separate food from trash? Nay, there is quite a difference where pressed lupines are concerned. They must be scalded just 7 times and immediately shelled, for if they are not immediately shelled, they become putrid. Therefore, to shell them is equal to separating trash from good food. Grinding. Said Arpapa, to chop beets is the same as to grind. Splitting wood for kindling is the same as grinding, said Arashi. Splitting leather is the same class of work as cutting by measure, if he is particular about it. Okay. So we're on 142. We got 2 pages left, and I had hoped I'd go faster. It's okay. We're gonna read 2 pages. On the other side of the break, we'll probably be done a little bit before 3 hours is up. We're gonna now go into the next song, which is called Request. Yeah, that was cool. That one reminded me with her singing and stuff, like some of those real melodic bits from Draconian. It's definitely some Draconian vibes in there. Draconian's a good fucking band. All right. Let's do kneading baking. I'm glad I didn't really have to hit the inner scripture that much today. I didn't. None of the citations here I wanted to jump into. I didn't feel like they were relevant enough. I'm trying not to. Don't want to kill. I have to work on my gut instincts here. That I'm gonna find something significant, and if not, move on quickly. Kneading and baking. Our Papa said the Tana of the Mishnah omitted the cooking of spices that took place in the tabernacle and instead that taught about baking. It is because the Tana follows the order of baking. First comes kneading, then baking, and cooking is included in the latter. Wool shearing, bleaching, Rabbi Bibi Hana in the name of Ar Yohanan said, Spinning wool from a live animal on the Sabbath makes one liable for 3 sin offerings. One for shearing, one for carding, and one for spinning. Or Kehana, however, said this is not the way shearing, carding, and spinning are done. Hence, he is not at all culpable. If one plucked quills, cut off their tops, and singed them on both sides, the rabbis taught that he is liable for 3 sin offerings. Tying and untying. What kind of tying and untying was done at the construction of the tabernacle, Rabbah? Others say, Ilyahya said, this is the way of the snail fishers, to untie their nets from one load and tie them on another. Interesting. So specifically snail fishing, and to talk about fishing and fishing nets, which then brings us into allusions of the house of the net, and as well as things we know of Loki, being he of hooks, traps, snares, as well as nets and knots. And you can't have a knot without a tying. And you can't untie something unless there is a knot. In the name of Ar Yohanan, provided 2 knots are made, one at each end, tearing in order to sew together with 2 stitches. Was there any tearing done at the tabernacle? Both Rabbah and Arzera said, when a curtain became moth-eaten, they tore out the moth-eaten part and sewed it together. Arzutra b. Tobiah, in the name of Rab, said, to rip a seam on the Sabbath makes one liable. To learn from a magician is a sin involving capital punishment. One who knows the science of astronomy and does not make use of it is not worth being spoken of. So hold on a second. On one hand, you're like, a magician is of sin, but you better be an astronomer, and this is astronomy this is supposed to be connected to whatever's going on when they were the king of Israel, the kingdom of Babylon. What is a magician? Rab says. Wizard, Samuel says. A blasphemer. Okay, so just to be a, quote, wizard or a magician is to be a blasphemer. Isn't that interesting? Ar Simeon b. Pazi, in the name of Ar Yashua b. Levi, said, whoever knows the science of astronomy and does not occupy himself with it is the party alluded to, Isaiah 5:12. But he deeds of the Lord they regard not, and the works of his hands they behold not. That's interesting. So hold on. Whoever knows the science of astronomy and does not occupy himself with it is the party alluded to in Isaiah 5:12. Okay, I am gonna look that up, but I just wanted to get Ripasemus. What is a magician? I'm sorry. What's there? Name of Joshua Levi. Whoever knows science, right? Fulvin Kaplan. One who knows. Okay. To rip a seam on the Sabbath makes one liable. To learn from a magician is a sin. Right. Okay, so one who knows the science of astronomy and does not make use of it. So if you know astronomy and make no use of it, it is a sin. That's sure. Okay, so Isaiah 5:12. See how I did that? It's nice and slick this time. Know what I'm doing. Yay. Isaiah 5:12. Bang. There's harp. Oh, hold on a second. these are always, wait, this might be off. It might not be 12. It might be 11 or 13 or whatever because of the issues from yesterday. So hold on a second. Yeah, because here's 13. Therefore my people are deported for lack of knowledge, and its abundance are men of famine, and its throng are glazed with thirst. Hold on a second. Woe to those. Here's Yahweh hosts, surely his houses shall become a desolation. 10 acres of vineyard. Woe to those rising early in the morning, that they may pursue intoxicant who are up late in the twilight until wine inflames them. Right, okay, so there's a harp, so they're timbering a flute, and there's their feast at the deeds of the Yahweh. They do not look, the work of his hands they do not see. Okay. The deeds of Yahweh they do not look, and the work of his... Okay, so there's all this, this is the grievances that not only are you having fun without honoring God, you're getting up really early to waste your time, and you're going to bed really late wasting your time to the flickering of the flame and in the twilight and the wine, right? And you know, it's yeah, it's the reckless behavior, right? You know, that there's a karmic justice that's going to happen. Like the Jews don't have to you don't have to put somebody in a sin offering for that. They just need to be reminded that they're going to be in a world of hurt until they give a sin offering, right? None of this is for your benefit. If it was for your benefit, they wouldn't force you to give a sin offering by law. They would just tell you, hey, listen, do you want to, you know, give that sin offering now? You look like shit, man. Right? It should be more like that, right? That would make more fucking sense to me as a way of doing things in a manner in which you get better. You get these problems out of your way, and then there's a certain kind of miracle of growth that you're going to experience. Anywho. Samuel ben Hameni, in the name of Jonathan, whence the adduction that we are bound to learn astronomy. From the passage in Deuteronomy 4:6, keep therefore and them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the nations. And what kind of wisdom is before the eyes of the nations? You must say that it is astronomy. Astronomy. Interesting. In the same passage in which they're cursing magicians and wizards, they are praising astronomy. Why? Why does astronomy fucking matter to you if you're against wizards and magicians? Because I don't see astronomy mattering to anybody now. I mean, like, with the times, with the occasion of knowing when there's a goddamn fucking, like, a full solar eclipse, because that would be just unusual to just creep up on you and nobody said, hey, yeah, by the way, we're lining up for an eclipse. Or there's a comet coming, or something, right? I don't hear about the Jews spending a lot of fucking time, like, do they spend, like, did I miss the stories where they talk about the telescopes they build? I mean, I'm sure they build them now, but I mean, they would have been building the best ways to see the stars then. And it's kind of ridiculous, right? And remember, you've got the three wise men, the 3 magi, wizards, mages that became part of this story with Jesus. How are you going to do a Messiah thing if your backstory involves profanities, profaners coming to you, right? Christians don't understand why many Jews are so pissed at them, because they don't understand the mockery of them that Christianity's basis is. Hunting deer. The rabbis taught to catch a slug and squeeze it so that it bleed. The rabbis taught to catch a slug and squeeze it so that it bleed is a transgression involving only a sin offering. Ar Yehuda said involving 2 sin offerings, for Yehuda holds that squeezing comes in the class of threshing, but the rabbis told him that squeezing is not threshing. What reason do the rabbis give for their opinion? Said Rabbah, their reason is that threshing can only be applied to produce of the soil. Slaughtering. Under which category, Rab said? Dying, and Samuel said taking life. Said Rab, I said something which may seem absurd, and so as to prevent future generations from deriding me, I will give a reason for what I said. Butchers are in the habit of coloring the throat of the carcasses with blood, in order that people may see that the meat is still fresh and be induced to buy. Salting the hide, etc. Is not salting a hide preparing it? Both Aryonan and Resh Lakish said, strike out one of them in the Mishnah and substitute it with marking. Scraping the hair off, etc. Araha bi Hanina said to polish a floor on the Sabbath is a transgression of the same order as scraping off the hair of the hide. Sure, I suppose, because it's kind of like a rubbing situation going on. Said Arhaya bi Abba Arashi told me 3 things in the name of Ar Joshua bi Levi, sawing rafters on the Sabbath that they may be equal in size and pointed makes one liable the same as cutting, daubing a plaster on a piece of cloth, making one liable the same as scraping hair off, smoothing a stone makes one culpable of hammering. Arsimeon bi Kisma, in the name of Arsimeon bi Lakish, said painting pictures on vessels or blowing out glassware makes one culpable, the same as hammering. Ar Yehuda said removing a border from cloth also makes one as culpable as hammering, but only in case one is particular about having the border remain on his cloth. Writing 2 letters, the rabbis taught if one wrote 1 large letter instead of 2 small ones, he is not guilty of any transgression, but to erase a large letter in the place of writing 2 small letters can be written, make one liable for a sin offering. Do they mean letters or letters? Like letters of the alphabet, or like you wrote like a note to your wife? Small letters evidently needed. Said Ar Menahem bi Yossi. This is the only case where the law is more rigorous with erasing than with writing. Building and demolishing, etc. Both Rabbah and Bizera, all work which is done in the last stages is considered the same as hammering, which is generally the finishing work. These are the principal acts of labor. These 2 exclude a derivation of the same kind as the principle when it is done with the principle together, and as to which our Elazar makes one liable for the derivation also, less one to exclude the extension of the warp or the woof, which Ar Yehuda added to the principal acts. But the rabbis said extending the warp included in warping, and extended the woof is included in weaving. Mishnah 3. Last page, too. And there is also another rule which was laid down: whosoever carries out on the Sabbath such things as are fit and proper to be stored and in such quantity is usually stored is liable, but wherever is not fit and proper to be stored, nor in such a quantity as is generally stored, only he who would store this is liable, because the storing shows that for him it is valuable. See, this really kind of shows you can train yourself to fucking control a person this way. You can train yourself to dictate a person's life, which we've seen this kind of thing, right? I mean, imagine like I'm forgetting all the actors' names, but you know, Misery, Stephen King, based on the Stephen King novel, right? Homie's not in a very good situation, and now all of a sudden he's got these limitations that are excessive. Misery's probably not even a great example. It's just the first thing that came into my head, right? Just to make a dramatic fucking point. All right, stored in such a way showing it is not valuable. Okay, Gemara, whatever is not fit and proper, said Ar Elazar, the latter part of the Mishnah is not in accordance with Ar Simeon B. Elazar, who said in the following Boretha, there is a rule that all which is not fit and proper to be stored, nor in such quantity as is generally stored, it held by one man fit and another man has carried it out, the latter becomes liable for the intention of the owner. Mishnah 4. It is forbidden to carry about chopped straw in quantities of cow's mouthful, stalks in quantities of camel's mouthful, stubble in quantities of a lamb's mouthful, herbs in the quantities of a kid's, leeks and onion leaves, if fresh, equal in size to dried figs, and if dry, in quantities of a kid's mouthful. The different kinds of fodder are, however, not to be counted together, as the prescribed quantities are not equal for all. Completely unnecessary, strange carrying, rationing habits, and everything else, right? Like, all of this is just kind of like, you would explain this to a child, so that way they can grow up and not fucking worry about it, because they can just live their life and be like, you know, it's fucking Saturday. Let me fucking relax. It's fucking Saturday. Why fucking am I? Like, Thresh, like, you know, this goes against the Talmud. And, you know, it's just like, I'm a big man. I do what I want. But I remember this is just like, this is work. You know, I don't got to work right now. I'm stressing myself out. I'm going to go inside. Like, that should be the closest thing that shit like this is for. But that's not how we apply it. That's not how they're applying it. Okay. Stubble in quantities of a lamb's mouthful. But does not a Boretha state the size of a dried fig? Both quantities are equal. Leek and onion leaves, if fresh, etc. Said Aryosi B. Hanina. Inferior food is not to be counted in with superior. In order to make out the prescribed quantity, superior food, however, may be counted with the inferior in order to complete the prescribed quantity. Mishnah 5, the carrying out of an article of food the size of a dried fig makes one liable, and the different kinds of them are to be counted together, for the prescribed quantity is the same for all kinds, with the exception of husks, kernels, and stalks. Likewise, bran, both coarse and fine. Ar Yehuda says that the husks are lentils are not accepted because they are boiled with the lentils and are counted in the same as food. Gemara. Except bran, etc., is not fine, as well as coarse bran to be counted in the same as food. Is there not a Mishnah concerning the separation of the first dough, that one is bound to separate the first dough made of flour mixed with its fine or coarse bran? Answer, Abaya. This is no contradiction. Poor people only generally use such mixed flour when Sabbath is concerned. Something possessing real value is always spoken of. The husks of lentils are not accepted, etc. Husks of lentils only, and not of beans. Did not a Boretha state that Ar Yehuda said, husks of beans and lentils? This presents no difficulty. The Mishnah refers to husks of new lentils, and the Boretha refers to old lentils and beans. And why not old ones? Said Ar Abuhu, because they, the husks of lentils and beans, are black, and when dished up like flies, in a bowl, they are not eaten with the food, and therefore are not counted in. Great, we're done with this chapter for tonight. Here's the footnotes for you to look at. Take a pause if you would like and read. Oops. There's your footnotes. And then next time, perhaps tomorrow, I do not know, chapter 8. Regulations concerning the prescribed quantities of victuals and beverages which must not be carried about on the Sabbath. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm pooped. Have a good night.